Even just this quarter is a big one for us. I mean, end of phase 2, phase 3 sign-off from the FDA is a big deal. And of course, we'll be kicking off that phase 2 anxiety study as well. We'll have data from that before year end.
Where do you see us, this industry, your company, in the next 12 months? Do you see a lot of growth that'll probably help in a lot of ways, indirectly, your company, your trials, and the overall awareness in 12 months from now? Hey everyone, thanks for checking into our latest TDR Psychedelic exclusive 2024. Where's January gone? It's already behind the books. We're almost into the last week and time flies. But as we've said at the top of the year, the small cap space, cannabis, and more notably psychedelics, big room for growth as we look at 2024, the year that we look back and say this could be the year where things changed. And who are some of the notable companies? Well, let's bring back in CEO of Cybin, which trades in the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol CYBN, Doug Drysdale. Is it safe to say Happy New Year, knowing that we're into the last week of January? I haven't seen you in a couple weeks.
I don't know when the cutoff is, but Happy New Year anyway. That sounds good.
I think the cutoff probably passed a couple days, maybe even a week or so ago. But look, as I said off the top, this is a huge year, I think. We cover cannabis, we cover psychedelics. There's been talk about rescheduling happening before the end of Q1 in cannabis. We saw MAPS and the news that they had a couple weeks ago with their Series A financing round. They've submitted their NDA. We could see, approval for the FDA at some point, in the summertime. I don't know the timelines, but a lot of the conversations I have lean to that. But this looks to be like a promising year where a lot of decision makers from Washington are finally listening, and we could actually see some real change, which makes all these conversations we've had in the last couple of years finally come together, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd add on top of that too that the year's starting with some really positive sentiment. I was just at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, and
How was that?
it was very busy, and I think the best one I've been to in many years, and I've been going for maybe
Really?
20 years now. And look, I think sentiment around biotech is really positive. You've got, I think, visibility of interest rates coming down. That's
Yep.
really good for biotech valuations. There seems to be general consensus that there's not going to be a recession. There's going to be a soft landing. We started the year and ended the previous year with a little bit of M&A going on in biotech. And there's been a few public offerings already this year. So I think sentiment is pretty good. It's a nice way to start the year.
Yeah, it was nice to hear Jerome Powell put a halt to interest rates back last month, and people obviously ensue and think that, will they come down? Maybe it's an election year. Maybe we should have an election every year, Doug. What that make the answer all the questions regarding the small cap space and biotech?
Election years are always unpredictable, so we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's a big year. Like there's some monumental moments where we've had conversations for a long time. But getting back to that conference that you attended, that's one of the marquee healthcare conferences in North America. When you look at the event that you attended this year, your company and the space that you're in, was there more interest and conversation generated this year from years past? Like how's it changed?
Yeah, so we had obviously the usual investor meetings, but also many potential partnering meetings. It's really interesting to see how Big Pharma is looking at the space. There's definitely excitement. The sector's maturing, right? We have MAPS, as you say, filed their NDA. Compass is going to have phase 3 data this year. We're about to start phase 3, and we'll have some other phase 2 data on DMT this year. We saw some GAD data from MindMed just at the end of last year. So lots of more mature data sets. I think it's impossible now to not accept that psychedelics are going to work in mental health and are going to get approved. And so now Big Pharma is definitely following along. They have been for quite some time, but now I think what's in their minds is how do they make psychedelics fit within their organization? How's the structure going to work for them? For a lot of really big pharma companies, they're all about boots on the ground. It's all about scale. But the mid caps are more about tactics and sort of blocking and tackling, and it's likely that kind of type of company that psychedelics fit best for, where you're likely going to have controlled distribution, REMS programs, and so a little more kind of a little more nuts and bolts work to do on distribution. So we're starting to see folks really pay attention. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a pharma transaction in the sector at some point this year. It's very possible.
Wow. This year, really? That's interesting. Well, it's been 60 days since you had some pretty strong data related to CYB003. I know last time we spoke, there was a lot of interest, from biotech analysts and some of the questions that they had. How's that matured, I guess, since the last time we spoke? Because the last time we had you on was early December. But, dating back to like some of the conversations that we had, in addition to some of these conferences that you've attended, has that matured a lot where people are really starting to understand and seeing what the results were and what it means?
Oh yeah, it definitely has. I mean, so those results were tremendous. We saw 8 out of 10 patients in remission from their depression after just 2 doses of CYB3, which is
Yep.
obviously unlike anything else that's been approved in that area. Um, as we're looking forward now, the initial efficacy data is great. Obviously, it's very impressive. We had 3-week data, 6-week data, but we're coming up to a point in the next several weeks where we'll have efficacy out to 3 months, so 3 months after 2 doses. And
Yep.
that seems to be, from discussions we're having with both pharma and payers, that seems to be an important threshold to them. Obviously, for payers, there needs to be an ROI on these treatments. Once you get past about 8 weeks or so of efficacy, it starts to look pretty interesting. 3 months is pretty
Uh-huh.
stellar. Like I expect that we'll see efficacy way out beyond 3 months, but 3 months seems to be a threshold for payers. So we'll have that data coming up soon. And then we'll also have our end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA this quarter as
Yep.
well. And I think for
Promising.
some folks are looking at us and saying, can we really go from our small phase 2 study to a phase 3? And I think that meeting will solidify that and remove sort of that uncertainty. I think so. That's I think what folks are looking for now. They've seen the efficacy data, they know it works. But okay, let's see you move to phase 3. I think that's the question.
When are you thinking of like timeline wise of starting that phase 3? Do you have an idea yet? It all depends, obviously, the feedback that you get. But, if everything goes what you're hoping to, do you have an idea timeline wise?
Yeah, we're gearing up already. So that process has already begun. We've been working with sites across the US for close to a year now.
Yep.
So getting those trained and recruited and all of that. So we should be ready to start recruiting patients, assuming we get FDA sign off sometime in quarter 2.
It's interesting you said about pharma getting involved. Like there's probably 4 or 5, I think, phase 3 trials that are going to be underway this year in 2024. I used to think that big pharma would come in and sponsor a lot of these phase 3 trials because of the cost. But do you think there is an opportunity where, I guess we saw Otsuka with Mindset, but do you think that some of these pharma companies are going to come in and say, forget obviously sponsoring a phase 3. They may do a full acquisition for some of these companies based on the data that's been reported so far with some of these trials?
Yeah, I don't know if M&A is the pathway that would be preferred given where valuations are.
True.
Licensing partnership may be preferable. And of course, that they could come in at any time in the middle of a phase 3, on the second phase 3. It could be a regional transaction, US, Europe, Japan. So I think there's lots of permutations of what could happen. But they definitely seem to be doing the work and trying to figure out how they can make these fit in their organizations.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the press releases. 2024 has gotten off to a roaring start for you. Fresh off compelling phase 2 data back in November involving CYB003 for treatment of major depressive disorder. You, like I said, did a phase 2 study of CYB004 and generalized anxiety disorder. So can you maybe touch on some of the information that was shared in a press release earlier this week and the significance of it all, and I guess what's next for the study?
Yeah, so that's right. So we have, unlike many companies in the sector, we have 2 programs, and
Yep.
the second program is based around DMT, as you said. We've now run 5 DMT studies, DMT and deuterated DMT. So we know an awful lot about
5.
these molecules. And we've been running recently phase 1 programs in the UK and in the Netherlands. So those are all complete. and we presented that data to FDA, and they've cleared us to start a GAD, or Generalized Anxiety Disorder, phase 2 study in the US. Obviously,
Hmm.
the US is where
Hmm.
we need to be. So that study will start this quarter. The good news is that as part of the work that we did on DMT, we looked at DMT in major depressive disorder in a phase 2 study.
Yep.
This was run by a small pharma, of course, before we acquired them. Um, and in that study, we also measured anxiety scores as well. So we know that DMT works in anxiety. So we're really going into this phase 2 study with it highly de-risked because we have efficacy data. And now we have an intramuscular formulation, which means we don't need to use an IV infusion pump, which of course psychiatrists don't have. And so we've
What's
got
the benefits of that then? What's the benefits of that then?
so an IV infusion pump, which we were using in phase 1, is a device that is programmed to deliver a certain amount of drug at a certain pace over a certain amount of time. And so it needs a
Gotcha.
technician and it needs the equipment. Psychiatrists don't really have that. And also then the patient's got a line in their arm for the whole time during the experience. So
Hmm.
removing that through the IM formulation means that a quick shot in the arm, in the deltoid, which we've all had plenty of those in the last few years.
Yeah.
Really easy,
Yeah.
right? Really easy to do.
Yeah.
90-minute experience. You're in and out in a pretty reasonable amount of time. And one thing I think we'll see with DMT that's a little different to psilocybin is we saw in our psilocybin study, a CYB3 study, that 2 doses make a big difference. Definitely, there's a
Yeah.
big
Okay.
improvement in remission rates with the second dose. We went from a 20% remission with dose 1, 80% remission with dose 2. The second dose is really important. Not everyone gets there on the first time. With DMT, we don't really see much difference between 1 and 2 doses because it's so much more intense and immersive. You're not really finding it. You're in the space until the drug wears off. So
Of
this could
course.
be a one administration, one and done with months in between doses. So we're pretty exciting about it.
Doug, have you had conversations with insurance companies? Because let's face it, some of the other methods, it's going to take a lot longer. And obviously, if you're an insurance company, time is money. So I think that's what's obviously appealing towards DMT is that it's a quicker timeline, but yet it is more extreme. But at the end of the day, if you have a mental health issue, you're going to do whatever it obviously takes to get better. So do you have those conversations with insurance companies, and what's some of the feedback that they receive, an interest level, I guess, pertaining to the compound that you're focusing on?
Yeah, so just as I said, with our DMT asset, it's about a 90-minute experience.
Yep.
Our psilocybin asset is about half the time you would see with regular psilocybin, give or take. So they're both fairly short. When we talk to payers, when we run scenarios, and we've run maybe 100 different sort of pricing and reimbursement scenarios. Once you get beyond about 8 weeks of efficacy, durability, it starts to look like a decent ROI. At 3 months, it looks pretty.
Hmm.
At 3 months, it looks pretty stellar. Payers then have a big return on that treatment compared to current treatments today, which are far less effective. If we see 6 months of durability, which I expect we will, we saw that with DMT. We saw 40% remission at 6 months with DMT. Then it'll be a no-brainer. And I don't think that the time and the duration is such a big factor. It'll be more about preference. Do you prefer a DMT experience? Do you prefer psilocybin experience? But physicians will have their choices. I don't think with the kind of efficacy that we're seeing that reimbursement is going to be the biggest challenge.
Hmm.
We're positioning CYB3 as an adjunctive therapy, so given alongside SSRIs, so patients don't have to go through the difficult process of titrating off of them. And when you look in that space, there are only 4 treatments approved as adjunctive therapies in depression, and they all have an average depression reduction score of about 3 points on the MADRS scale, and we're seeing a 14-point reduction. So, and very rapidly, not weeks and months before you see that. So I think when you look at the space overall where we are, that I think reimbursement is not some. It's always going to be something that we have to pay attention to, but I think we have a very compelling proposition.
When you look at some of the data and stats that you touch and share, knowing that how many years have you been in the biotech industry?
30 something.
When you look at some of your professionals that you speak to and see some of the results, is this almost like let's face it, the greatest invention that you've ever seen in your career pertaining to this? Like those are staggering stats that are nowhere even remotely comparable to one to the other.
Yeah,
Like I
they
do.
are. They are staggering. 80% remission rates in depression after a couple of doses, unheard of. And it is funny when we talk to some pharma companies and even some investors. Sometimes the reaction is that
It's too good to be true, I
too
would
good to be
think,
true.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Too good to be true is definitely a reaction that we've had from time to time from folks, which is
So how do you walk them through? Is it just based on, let me explain to you and show you the data that's been provided, and then after that, what's their response?
yeah, look, we've been really careful to run very thoughtful and well-designed studies. It's important to get those things right. And once you walk people through how the study was managed and executed, then they get it. And I think that not enough attention is necessarily being paid to this. When we think about when we come to market with CYB3,
Yeah.
we'll be marketing the treatment based upon the phase 3 data sets that we have. So getting the study designs right, maximizing efficacy through the duration and through pushing the dose up in a higher strength and from 2 doses, and the convenience of adjunctive therapy, not have to titrate patients off. That's going to be the full proposition. So we've started really from that commercial proposition and worked backwards to our clinical study designs.
I think a lot of people have wanted to ask the question too. Once you get into a phase 3, the trial size, the amount of people that are involved, you're obviously going to see, but you will see a bigger expansion of people involved within that trial from what you've done previously.
Yep, absolutely. The next study we're planning, and we've proposed to FDA 220 patients in the study,
Okay. Okay.
randomized 1-to-1. So half of them will have CYB3 and half of them will have placebo. And that study is 18 months or so, 18 to 24 months, depending on recruitment. So definitely bigger. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge study. It's smaller than the studies that Compass is running. And it's smaller than many, many, many other depression studies because the effect sizes here are so huge. Once you get
Mm.
that sort of large effect sizes, you don't need as many subjects in the trial.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. One thing I want to touch on too, you had news actually earlier this month, top-line positive data from your phase 1 studies, a proprietary deutery DMT molecule CYB004. You kind of outlined that, and SPL028. So simplify on the significance of that announcement, and most importantly, what are the next steps required?
Yeah, basically the purpose of phase 1, right, is to show safety and tolerability. So we know that DMT and deuterated DMT is safe. To determine a dose, and we did 2 very large phase 1 studies, one in the UK, one in the Netherlands, really trying to understand dosing, and then also we had to translate that into an intramuscular formulation as well. So now we're going into a phase 2 study with GAD. FDA just cleared that, and we know the dose, we know the route of administration, and we're excited to be going into generalized anxiety disorder. That we see GAD as the gateway to all of the anxiety disorders, and these
Yeah,
have about an 18-19% prevalence, so they're huge. They're bigger than depression by quite a way.
it's a huge
Yeah,
market.
and once these treatments are shown to work in one form of anxiety, they'll undoubtedly be used in others as well.
For those watching as well, learning this space, GAD stands for General Anxiety Disorder. And who does not have anxiety? Heck, you got a phone and you're on TikTok for 15 minutes. It's probably a good chance you got anxiety afterwards, right? Um, look, let's bring this all in, and I'll let you run. But we're almost a month into 2024. Where do you see us? This industry, your company, in the next 12 months. Do you see a lot of growth that'll probably help in a lot of ways, indirectly, your company, your trials, and the overall awareness in 12 months from now?
Yeah, look, even just this quarter is a big one for us. I mean, end of phase 2, phase 3 sign off from the FDA is a big deal,
Yep.
and of course we'll be kicking off that phase 2 anxiety study as well. We'll have data from that before year end, so that's going to be a fairly short time frame. And of course, we're going to see some other things in the sector. We'll see, hopefully soon, MAPS have their NDA accepted. That'll be a good milestone
Yes.
for them. Approval, as you say, sometime this year, is typically about 10 months, but they do have a special access protocol, so it could be sooner. If it's sooner, then we may quickly after that see DEA rescheduling of MDMA, and which is all these kind of useful milestones. And then Compass will have phase 3 data as well. So it's a pretty big year for the sector overall, and really good to see it maturing.
Did you see that HHS documentation that they wrote about to the DEA about the recommendation of cannabis?
Yep.
The 234-page. I could not believe the amount of information that was in there and how they got it all wrong. But that's public knowledge now. And I think in a lot of ways, like I said, indirectly, it only helps as to what you're doing because, I think a lot of people still question the cannabis space and the medical benefits that were involved, but there's a lot of stuff that was outlined there. And it's more of an adult use CPG play. Where this, like you said, as we've said all along, the data doesn't lie, and it's a medical play, and it's badly needed. So I think that stuff only helps the conversation to push forward, especially for both industries, don't you?
I think it will shows that if that happens that DEA is flexible and willing to make changes. But I'll say from a pharmaceutical point of view, there are plenty of examples of DEA rescheduling drugs once they become approved by FDA. Because once the FDA confirms that a treatment is safe and effective, it no longer meets the criteria for Schedule 1, so it has to be rescheduled.
Right. One can only hope, right? Keep up the good work. Tell the team I say hi, and I won't say Happy New Year anymore. Happy January, and best of luck in this quarter, and we'll be watching you closely as you get the green light, and among other things. But I appreciate you checking in for an update.
Great to see you, Shab. Take care.
You as well. Thanks, Doug.
Hey everyone, so what'd you think of the video? Leave your comments below and let us know your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. As usual, subscribe to our channel by clicking on the link here. If you want to see more videos like this, then click on the link here and click on that bell for all notifications. Because most importantly, we want to know your feedback because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.